The title of her presentation is Distribution of Wild Boar Routing and its Impacts on Soil Characteristics in a Forested Area in Hungary. Natalia, are you ready?
Yes, thank you.
Please start it.
Thank you. Can you see my screen?
Yes, we can see.
Okay, so I'll start right away. Just a second, please. Okay, so good morning, everyone. Good morning, members of the committee. Thank you for being here. So today I'm going to talk about the distribution of wild boar routing and its impact on soil characteristics in a forested area in Hungary, as Professor Csányi said. For those of you who don't know, this is a wild boar here, and this is the routing that it does. So it looks for food in the soil, whether it's plants, small small insects, or other kind of food in the soil. And doing this, it makes a small distortion in the soil.
Natalia, please slow down. This is not Spanish, this is English.
Sorry.
Okay,
thank you. So the first thing we need to understand is that there's a conflict based on this behavior between humans and wildlife. So there are different stakeholders. You can see here hunters, wildlife managers, nature conservationists, and others, and each of those have a different point of view about this issue. So there's a group saying that there are too many wild boars, that there are too many rootings in the soil, and it's causing a big problem. And the other group is saying that the wild boar is native to Europe, so there is no problem related to that. In any case, there is some kind of disturbance based on the wild boar routing on the ecosystem, so whether it's biotic factors or abiotic factors. In our study, we're interested in analyzing the soil characteristics, so we did some mapping on the soil. Well, here you can see this is the effect of the wild boar on the soil. This is a shallow routing, which is not that deep, but it's extended over the area. There is one thing about wild boar, is it's introduced in many parts of the world, so it's an invasive species, and there the other species are not adapted to this kind of behavior. However, here, when it's native, it can also be a bit of an issue because of the depth of the routing. So there can be this extended routing, and also this can be this deep routing, which can be more focused, so not in a big area, but it can have some more impact. The other effect on community structure and ecosystem function can be derived from the geography of the land. So we are interested in a forested area, as we mentioned, and the forest can have different geography. So this is not an agricultural land, it's not like this, it's not flat. It has some kind of slope sometimes, as you can see here. So the problem with this kind of slopes is that sometimes the sediment can go down, like can cause erosion, can cause, based on the runoff of the water, and this can cause some problems in the soil properties. So you can see here, this is here in the Baba Valley, and it's caused just by the rainfall. So the rain here, this is an upper land, the rain comes and brings all the sediment down, and this causes a big problem. However, the wild boar is also very flexible about its feeding habits. So it can, even though it is non-sedimented, so it's a dark soil, the natural soil of the forest, it can do the rooting there. And also here, you can see that there's some sedimentation here, and also the wild boar is feeding there. So we were interested in analyzing these differences because all the stakeholders say that, okay, there's some disturbance related to this. So we're interested in knowing, is it really a big disturbance? Is it going to be in the whole land or just in a few parts? And also, what is the issue related to that? So we have 3 research questions. The general aim is to find out the differences between rooted areas and non-rooted areas. So for understanding the whole analysis, this is a rooted area. So it's a place where there is a disturbance on the soil. Non-rooted area, so when the soil is natural, let's say. So there are 3 questions that we formulated to reach this aim. The first one is related to the spatial pattern, so how big is the disturbance in the area? The other one is about the temporal extent, so if it happens once monthly, or it happens all the time, or it happens just sometimes of the year. Also, we want to know if there's a preference in the location, because the forest has different type of soil, so it can be sedimented or non-sedimented, it can be flat or it can be steep, so depending on that, if there's a preference. And we also want to know, once the rooting is done, what is the difference in the soil? Is it changing inside the soil or outside of it? So to reach this aim, we selected this area. This is here in the Babat Valley. It's close to the university. We chose this plot right here. We created these 30 transects, and we were walking once a month in all of these transects. This is 500 meters around each of those. to analyze the location and frequency. So we were walking on the transects, we mark a GPS point at the beginning and the end of these routings, so in the holes that we found, and we classify them by these 3 categories about depth, and also by these 2 categories depending on the soil type. Besides that, to do the analysis further, we chose this area because there's a highway here and there's an arable field here, so there's like differences in the comparison, and it's not seen here, but this area is higher than this one, so it goes like this, it goes down. There's a sedimentation problem in that area, as you can see in the picture, and there has some structures being built because of to prevent this problem to evolve further. Also, after that, we did some analysis on soil characteristics. So we analyzed compaction and moisture with one equipment and the other characteristics with another equipment. For each of these analyses, we check inside the routing, so inside the hole, in the ring around the routing, so this is the soil that the wildboar moves around, and in the control area, so this is here, the natural area of the forest. The equipment we used were these 2. This first one here is the Ekelkamp penetrologer, which is used to measure compaction. So we use the equipment, push it down 80 centimeters, the upper centimeters layer, and measure how hard the soil is. Also, we use a small sensor here to measure the moisture in the first 10 centimeters of the soil. And for the other characteristics, we use this. We find the routing, we make a hole 30 by 30 centimeters. We gather the soil and mix it up, and then we take 1 kilogram per sample in the laboratory. This is a near infrared spectrometer, which measures everything else. Now the results. This is the maps from October last year to August this year, and here the dark cells show where routing happened. There are darker cells because it's possible that in one cell, more than one routing is going to happen over time. At the same time when we took the measurements. So you can see here the evolution of these disturbances. We can see that there's a preference in the middle of our plot, so where the forest is coming from from steep to flat, and also there's an avoidance here where you remember the highway was and also where the arable field was. Also, we can see here, this is the previous map, but in numbers. So there's a high preference of non-sedimented areas. So here the yellow and the red lines are showing the non-sedimented areas, the ones with the natural soil in the forest. And we can see also that there is an increasing amount of rootings during the cold months. So during the autumn, probably because of the acorns and the soil is more moist, so there are more animals and small insects available there. And also during the winter, we're assuming that is because it's hard for them to dig deeper because the soil is too hard, because the temperatures are too low. On average, this is 100% represents the whole area, so the whole proportion of cells, and 10% in average of the non-sedimented soil, area is being used by wild boar, and only 1.4% is using the non-sedimented parts. So also we analyze the appearance of the rootings. So here the green line is showing where the routing are new. Every single month we're checking this one was here before or not. And then we mark accordingly. We also checked, so we can see here that there's an increase during the cold months, and then as the months grow hotter, there's a decrease of the new routings. In the same relation is the undisturbed area. So we can see here that even though there's a disturbance, there's something happening in the forest, the highest amount of area is not covered by the routings. We also made an analysis based on the depth of the routings. So we can see here there is a preference for shallow rootings. Again, we think that is because in the autumn months, because there are more acorns available, and in the cold months because the soil is too hard to dig deep. But you can see here that in the hotter months, they prefer a little bit of medium rooting, so not that deep, but they still dig because they can afford this extra energy required for that. And now the analysis for the soil. So we measure the compaction. These are the 5 sedimented soil samples and the 5 non-sedimented. Here you can see that there is a variation in the results, but it's not significantly different. As you can see here in the statistics, the p-values are not significantly different. But since we saw a difference, we started checking, and we found out that on the first 20 centimeters, the upper 20 centimeter layer, there is a difference. So the sedimentation affects the difference, of course, because sediment is a little bit softer, so it can be easier for them to dig in there. However, they don't prefer it, probably because there is no food there. Also, we measure the soil moisture with a small sensor, I don't know if you remember, and we found out that there is no difference either by sedimentation or not, or by the rooting activity. So as you can see here, qualitatively, we can say that there's no main difference, probably because it depends mainly on the rain and weather factors. About the soil organic matter, we measure this because it's important for plant growth and all the development of the trees and everything in the forest. And we found out that there is a difference based on the sedimentation of the soil. So here you can see the purple squares are showing you only the sedimented samples here in the rooting, so inside the hole, in the ring, around the hole, and in the control, a little bit outside of the hole. And there is a difference, not when you compare them within them. If you find one rooting and you measure all these 3 points, it's going to be similar. But if you compare these 3 points with the same 3 points in a rooting in a non-sedimented area, there's going to be a difference. So it's mainly based on the sedimentation of the soil. So when the rainfall comes and drags everything down and there's a different type of soil there, that's going to make a bigger difference than the rooting. Of course, there's a difference related to the rooting, but it's not statistically significant. The bigger one is related to the soil type. The same for total nitrogen, we measure it because of course it's also important for plant growth. And we keep the same classification. So the purple square here is the sedimented soil. The blue square here is the non-sedimented soil. Again, there is a difference based on the rooting activity, yes, but it's not statistically significant, as you can see here in the p-value. However, the significance is derived from the sedimentation of the soil. We measure also pH to find out the ability of the plants to gather these nutrients. And then again, we've classified purple squares by sedimentation and blue squares by non-sedimentation. And the type of soil keeps being the most important factor in this analysis. Now, based on the results we found, we can compare with other results and other people have found. And there was a study in Germany in 2005 and another one here in Hungary last year. And even though in those they found that the rooting can be from 20 to 40 centimeters deep, the deep ones, they use only from 5 to 10 centimeters from 5 to 10 centimeters, sorry, to analyze. So there is a problem here when we want to compare with other studies because ours are way deeper than those. So it may be important to do this kind of analysis in a smaller depth. Also, we found out that in rootings with higher depths, so the bigger the rooting, the more amount of soil organic matter is mixed with mineral content. So this can have a negative effect or a positive effect. The authors are not clear about this because it depends on many other factors. The vegetation cover, the type of soil, the weather, anything else that can affect this kind of rootings. There's also a study about the potential benefit of these rootings for amphibians, earthworms, and insects because these holes, even though we found that they have no significant difference in the chemical properties, they can actually be good for small animals because it can gather water when it rains, and this can be kind of a home for them to survive when it's hot. So it can be good for them. Of course, we need to try it out to check if it's like that. This is a summary of the significant differences we found. So as you can see here, all the significant differences in the properties we studied are based on the sedimentation of the soil. So that doesn't mean that there's no effect of the rooting. There is probably an effect because we saw some differences in the graphics, but the sedimentation is more important than the rooting. So it can override these effects. Also, we found that the soil activity redistributes the soil layers. So this can be important for management plans in the future. And other authors, you can see here, this is in Argentina, in Switzerland, in Germany, in Italy, they found similar results to ours. So there is an impact derived from the rooting, but factors can override these impacts when we study the overall processes of the ecosystem. Now, based on those results, we conclude that the disturbance is continuous, but it can be higher during the calm months, probably because of the reasons we discussed before. Also, there is a preference for non-sedimented and flat areas in these forests. Probably in another forest is going to be similar. There's an avoidance of areas with big infrastructures. This is what we found in our study. However, we know that wild boar goes to cities and to places where people live. So this can be further studied to analyze why they avoid this particular highway and not other places. There's an abundance of shallow rootings, so they very much enjoy digging around in big areas. I think it's also because they don't have that much expense of energy. There's a significant difference in soil compaction, but not in soil moisture. This is important because it doesn't matter if the soil has a lot of nitrogen and phosphorus and potassium. If the soil is too hard or too dry, it's not going to be good for the plants. So if it causes an impact, this needs to be studied further. The major factor influencing the soil characteristics is the sedimentation, as we mentioned, and the rooting behavior doesn't have really a significant damaging or beneficial impact on these characteristics. We also recommend further analysis about the benefits of the rooting activity for other animals. Even though they're not statistically significant, we need further analysis in different depths to check these differences. And we recommend that the monitoring plans take into account the soil mapping, because if they mix up the soil layers, then this can be a problem if they don't take into account that there might be a wild boar the cause of this. Finally, I'd like to thank, first of all, my supervisors, because they've been the cornerstone of my existence here over the past months, and the Tempus Foundation for my scholarship, the Dunan Ipoy National Park, where the Babat Valley is, the providers of the devices that I used, and to my friends that helped me through all this process. And thank you for your attention. And I'm ready for any questions you may have.
Thank you very much, Natalia.